recording going. Okay. Two basic things that I want to try to do this evening. One is to kind of review project due dates, where you are on the beginning couple of projects, and are the two biggies, the group project and also the individual school improvement plan, and kind of any general questions or clarifications that maybe I need to answer or to make to those things. I wanted to give you kind of my timeline, my schedule. I am trying to accomplish a lot of stuff that was going to happen a little bit later in the semester that I'm kind of working on that now, so I can pretty much free myself up in the month of April to provide feedback on these projects as they begin to come in. And speaking of feedback, I've got your first two reflection papers. I have actually read through those. I have not gone through and made comments. My process is to read everything once and then to go back through and try to identify any particular comments or suggestions I might make. Now, realizing these are reflections, so you don't necessarily have to make any changes in them, but I will, offer, kind of my 2 cents worth, just so you'll have kind of that sort of feedback as you use this type of information going into the other projects. The group project, the program evaluation project, that first final draft of that is due on April 5th, and this is no change from what's in the on the webpage. I hope to have those, or I will have those fully reviewed and with feedback by the 12th, somewhere thereabouts. And then you'll have until May 3rd to submit, kind of a final. And if I find that the draft on the 5th, on April 5th, is in good shape and doesn't need any real, tremendous changes that I would expect or whatever, I will accept that as a final draft also. But I'll let you know about that by the 12th too. So there are 4 of those, so a week shouldn't be a problem, and kind of spending a couple of 3 hours on each one of those. The school improvement project, which is an individual project, which is a large and fairly structured one, is due on the 12th, on April 12th. I do have some conflicts in that week, so I'm going to try to get feedback to you on those no later than the 20th. It will take a touch longer because there are 2 classes and about 30 of those to read and provide a bit of feedback on. And once again, the final version of that's due no later than the 3rd, then May 3rd. The reflection on leadership, well, now let's look the paper and reflection on opportunity gaps is due on the 19th. I will review those and provide some feedback on those because it's fairly, there are some things that probably ought to be in there, and it's all included in, the directions, the rubrics and things like that. And I'll try to get those back to you by the 26th. They're only a couple of pages long, so it shouldn't take me too long to get through those. And any changes that you might choose to make or prefer to make will be due by the 3rd, once again, all by May 3rd. The reflection on leadership theories, which is a couple of 3-page paper, once again, not overly meaty, but more of a reflection on leadership theories and kind of where you were in your thought process. I will not do feedback on those because they're reflection papers. You don't have to resubmit those. I will read them, and I will, if I say anything that, I feel like needs a comment or something like that, I'll provide it, but I don't imagine there'll be an awful lot of comments on those either. And so that'll just give you kind of a timeline for when first drafts are due, and my reviews, and then when rewrites are due, any rewrites. So the design of the model is to get you to submit good work and give you a little feedback, and then submit even better work. And so everything will be tip top at the beginning. So the big thing is just reacting to the feedback and making sure that you've covered any lapses or gaps that might exist in them. I don't imagine that the writing will be that much of an issue in terms of individual writing, because you all should be pretty good writers by now. It's just a matter of are you talking about the things that you were asked to talk about, and is it reflective of the readings and things that you may have been involved in? So just a quick review of those. Any questions? Okay, the little quiz on the legal stuff, the law and what's required, that will be somewhere around the 1st of April. After tonight, we won't meet again the next 2 weeks, because I wanted to make sure that you had plenty of time to get these projects pulled together, and feeling pretty good about those, and plenty of time for your groups to get their jobs done, and get that put in a nice draft form for the 5th. So we're gonna, I will be available if you or your group would like to do a sit down, or not a sit down, but a face-to-face, a Zoom, or some sort of conference call or something like that. I'll be glad to do that. I won't obviously be going anywhere. So with the exception of April 14th through the 16th, I will be out of town. It is our 43rd wedding anniversary, so I cannot work during that 2-day time period there. There must be celebration. So we'll disappear out of town someplace for a couple of days and disconnect from the web, so to speak. So that's a promise I made a while back, and so I'm trying to keep that every year. Yes, and she is a remarkable woman to have put up with me for that period of time. But anyhow, that's the schedule. That's kind of how things are shaking out, and I think we'll be on good track to kind of stay on that schedule in terms of feedback and also for your resubmissions and all that. So are we good? Good with that stuff? Okay. I'll put that over here. The things that I really wanted to talk a little bit tonight about and kind of get your thoughts on is this idea of going from a strategic plan mission sort of notion to institutional goals, school goals, or division goals, or whatever the institution is that you're going to be developing your kind of your school improvement model sort of idea on. It should incorporate, obviously, where those school improvement ideas are coming from, how they are connected to sort of the school or institution's mission statement and our goals and objectives. And so, that it's important to kind of think about how you get to that point of how you get from goals, which are fairly unspecific most of the time and fairly unmeasurable. I mean, there might be some global measure that you can use, or there might be some perceptual measure that you might use in the sense of thinking about using surveys or focus groups or stuff like that. But in terms of actually measuring progress within a building or within a division, it's important to have a much higher level of specificity. And so once you kind of get in the strategic planning process, once you kind of get down below institutional mission, institutional goals, all those sorts of things, then you get into a much more specific notion of strategic planning that has to do with setting departmental or functional units objectives, and those objectives are probably to be considered as strategies. How do you implement what strategies do you implement in order to accomplish objectives to meet those goals? And once you get to that strategic level where you're talking about who does what and how that's done and what resources are needed to do that, you have to also be thinking about what are the metrics we use to measure that? And as I think I mentioned the last time we talked, one of the things that we do too often is we use these summative measures as ways of trying to indicate that we've accomplished something. And those are just not great measures. One, because they are summative, and there are too many other confounding variables or confounding sorts of activities that might be going on in a building, really to attach them directly to particular strategies. And so typically for particular strategies, you either identify or develop particular metrics to measure those strategies. Say, for example, you have a goal that is to increase the level of literacy within a building or within the early grades in a building. Then a more particular objective might be that you want to increase the level of comprehension among free reading exercises. Well, how do you measure the level of comprehension in free reading exercises? Well, obviously you have to think of, what is the metric that we're going to use to do that? And if it doesn't already exist in some way, either as a function of some of the systems that are available to teach comprehension, then you have to think about, okay, well, what metric do we need to develop here, and in what way to see that we're raising the level of comprehension, and so that takes a certain local initiative to make sure that happens, and not only what's the metric, but when are we going to collect it, how we're going to collect it, who's going to be responsible for that, and if it's the teacher, it's the teacher. If it's reading specialist, it's a reading specialist, whatever. But there is a, there is a chain from metric working backward to particular strategy to slightly broader objective to goal. And so, that's the reason typically when you're doing school improvement stuff and all, you don't want to have a whole ton of goals to work with. You want to specifically deal with, maybe one at a time or one or two at a time, and no more than a couple of specific objectives into that. Because if you're trying to do 10 things and most of what you're using are summative evaluation measures, then you have no way of knowing what impact any one of them has. And that's really why you do school improvement planning, is to identify specific changes that can be made in a building or in a grade level or a disciplinary or wherever. But what specific changes, sort of finite changes can we make that we then can collect data on and figure out if they're doing what we suspect they might do or hope they might do. And so it's that level of detail that always trips people up, because you're probably trying to do too much, or you're trying to use some of these summative outcomes to figure out what's going on. So you kind of focus small, and you work really hard on small. And if you've done pretty good job in prioritizing things and identifying those things that are most key to get done, then you start to see changes, and then you can you kind of put that one aside. You keep monitoring it, but you put that one aside, and then you focus on the next priority. And so whether that's done semester by semester or year by year or whatever, I mean, that's part of your planning model or your planning progress. But it is this idea of getting specific and being clear about what things mean and how you define certain things, and then working very hard and very diligently on those specific things with specific outcomes. I use specific a lot, but that's the assessment and measurement person in me, because the specificity is really the kind of the heart and soul of doing any type of measuring or assessing of anything. Okay. Thoughts, comments on any of that? Where are you in your path to these school improvement plans?
Are you talking about referring to like the project that we're doing with our group?
No, individual. It's sort of important to the group work too, because it kind of taps into what data you want to collect to evaluate whether things are working or not. But it's much more important and specific, that word again, to the individual school improvement project.
I personally, I would say that my school is kind of like on the path of rebuilding itself. So I'm a 4-year teacher. I've done all my teaching at Central Wilkes Middle. I recently learned that Central Wilkes had a really bad reputation as like the school wasn't safe. There was a lot of fights. No one cared about grades. So we were recently evaluated to receive Lighthouse status through the Leader in Me program. And apparently we've come a very long way in such a short amount of time, which has helped me change my perspective on my school. So we're currently, I feel like now that we have like behavioral issues under control and school improvement wise, we're focusing on academics. So again, I feel like we're like in the rebuilding part of our school improvement.
Yeah. Right. Well, you deal with what needs to be dealt with first, and then you move on. Then you kind of you don't put that aside. You kind of move it over and monitor it constantly, and make sure that there's some fidelity of implementation to what you've implemented, and people are on board, and you have a way of getting new people into the mix as they come on board, and you're constantly reminding people of what they are supposed to be doing and what they need to be doing. And, those things that you do on a monitoring basis. Now it's time to move on to, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next most important thing to deal with? And if it's on the academic side, then you figure out, okay, which one or two things on the academic side are the most important things to deal with right away. And you kind of go through that model, and you never have more than a couple of things on your plate at a time, because if you do, not only is it hard to manage all that, but two, it's hard to know what's working. If you're doing 4 or 5 things, then it's really hard to figure out, okay, which one of these things really had an impact. So you be very incremental about it. I think that's the maybe the proper word there. Very incremental.
Looking at it that way, like transitioning from just a special ed teacher and looking into the lens of a leadership position, that makes a whole lot of sense. Because as a reg ed teacher, there are a lot of situations that I've been frustrated with where I'm like, why aren't we doing this? Or why aren't we focusing on that? Or this is more important than this. My little 4-year experienced self is saying, why don't we work on all of this stuff? And but looking at it from what you just said, it is very much a strategic approach to helping Central Wilkes Middle School improve overall as a whole. So that makes a lot more sense. And I should be a little less critical.
Criticism is a good way to start a discussion, though. Sure. I mean, that's if you're tactful in your criticism, it's a good way to start a discussion.
Oh, and yeah,
that's really
you got to be positive.
Yeah, that's really what has to happen in schools, and this whole planning, this process of strategic improvement is the communication across all groups in the school. And if you can create that environment, then you're halfway to figuring out how to get started, sort of thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay. Sure.
I have a question. What is the total length of the school improvement plan paper? I saw where like some of the sections have like 2 to 3 pages and then 2 pages, but the other sections, I don't see a page number.
I don't think I put a page, an overall page thing on. Some stuff there are, stuff that tends not to get done that you tend to look over and skip over. Or you want to, a lot of times what happens in these school improvement plans is that people want to spend all the time talking about the context and sort of the historical, the chronology of what's already been done and the context of that. And so in terms of page limits there, it's really to keep you not going over so much, because history is history, and you can always learn from it, but at the same time, there's not much you can do about that. It's the classic notion. You got 2 doors, and in one door you can go back and fix all the mistakes you've made in your life, and in the other door you can find $10 million. Which door do you go through? I mean, it does no good to go back and fix all the mistakes in your life because you've already gotten past them. So why would you want to do that? So now let's come forward, and I'll take the $10 million every day. But you know, it's a philosophical sort of process or a thought process of not wanting to be so caught up in the history, the context, the past, that you know, being caught up in that enough to know kind of what's the, you know, what are our hurdles here that we're going to have to get over, but at the same time not being so caught up in it that you get caught up in that sort of notion of inertia and tradition. And you know, tradition can be anything you want it to be after you do it once. You know, second time you do it, it's a tradition. So you know, you don't have to do it 50 years in a row. So it is a, you know, it is. I have purposely not set a limit on that because I think you need to provide the information, you know, that expressly kind of responds to what's in that outline and what's in that rubric. And you know, don't worry about, my God, is this going to be long enough, or is this too short, or you know, don't worry about that. You just make sure the information's in there. And plus, if I think that it's missing some components when I do my review of it, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
People write differently. Some people are, you know, I'm a technical writer, so you know, my entire dissertation is 80 some pages, and all of my stuff tends to be shorter as opposed to longer. But it's because I'm a technical writer, and so I don't, you know, I don't embellish a lot.
Thank you.
No problem. Other thoughts, questions?
I have asked you a question on this, on the part 2 of that is talking about the regulations. Is there any resources that you recommend? I just kind of find myself a little lost where it says discussion of the NC DPI guide and impact on development.
Yes, I'm getting ready to turn that block on. Actually, I'll do that this evening, and it has 3 or 4 sources in there.
Okay, thank you.
There you go. Yeah, the resources are there. I just had not turned that block on.
Thank you.
Other questions about projects, any of the projects?
So I'm looking at my school improvement plan right now, and there's 12 goals. Is that excessive?
Yeah, well, it might be a lot, but hopefully you don't have, you're only going to deal with a couple of objectives though, beyond your 12 goals.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Yeah, well, read one of your goals. Read one of your goals.
By June 2021, THS will reduce the number of office referrals that result in out-of-school suspensions by 20 percentage points from 1075 to 858, thus reducing out-of-school suspension days by 20% from 533 to 429.
Well, that's a pretty specific goal, but it's also broad. You know? And so when you think about the objectives, what are the actual activities that are going to take place to do that?
I have to look for that. Like
Yeah.
this.
That's for this project. Yeah, for this project, you don't need to focus. I mean, you obviously, if you have 12 goals, you have 12 goals in the plan. That's fine.
Okay.
But for this, the scope of this project, you don't need to dwell on 12 goals. You just, you pick one goal and perhaps there are 1 or 2 goals and the objectives that go with those 1 or 2 goals.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I was having a panic attack, so I don't have to write.
You probably wouldn't have more than 25 or 30 objectives to deal with there, but now you want to, obviously you want to keep it as you go down the level. And that was the point that I didn't make very clear while ago, and it just needs. But as you kind of work down the levels, think of the activity also coming down. And so once you get to the particular objectives, then you begin to think about, okay, who's going to do this? What will it take to do it? What's the time frame? All those very specific things that you need to pay some attention to. But it doesn't mean that you're going to do that for every objective in this thing. Now, obviously, as a building, you will want to do that at some point. But for this project, I'm asking you to focus on, one or two goals at most, and just no more than a handful of objectives.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Don't want to kill yourself with this thing. I mean,
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Other questions? I mean, this is the point at which you do the work. This is the point at which I don't have much that I can offer you that's going to be overly helpful to you beyond the readings and things that we've already talked about in terms of doing the work, except to come on and do a pep talk and remind you again and again and again that I'm available if you want to do one-on-one, or if you want to do a team meeting or whatever. I'm right there. I'll be glad to set that up. But otherwise, I'm not going to bore you on content that's really not going to be terribly useful to you in terms of accomplishing these projects at this point. Now, we will put as I'll open up the next frame, as I mentioned to Cindy, I'll open up the next frame, and so you'll have the resources that deal with the requirements, the legal requirements for doing this, the North Carolina statutes and the regulations and all that. And so you can read those things, and they're very specific, and they talk about, who's supposed to be on a school improvement team and how that process is supposed to go, and how you handle meetings, and all kinds of very specific regulations in it. And so you kind of have to do all this work in a building as an administrator within the confines of those regulations. But at the same time, you don't want those regulations to limit you in terms of creativity and strategies, because they're mostly focused on process and not focused on actual outcomes and content. And so you need to be aware of those, because you have to fill out the forms, you have to do all those things that have to occur, and you have to have certain people on your teams, and all that sort of stuff. And that's an accreditation issue and not a content issue. So yeah, but I would say don't get too deep into that stuff quite yet, unless you're wanting to just read that, get into that a little bit, because it won't measurably change what you're doing with the group evaluation project or the individual school improvement project. Is there any piece of content that you've kind of been exposed to or read so far that we need to talk about, or we need to spend some time with?
Are equity gaps the same as equity traps?
Sort of, yeah, can be.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Generally, when you talk about equity gaps, you're talking about you're more focused on who the students are, and who's not getting what, and who's those sorts of things. The equity traps is I can give you one of those right away. It's called MTSS. That's a big time equity trap because it's and you know, everybody does it. Everybody in you know, it's the State Department kind of anointed that as the model that we want everybody to follow. And it just turns out that it's really good at resegregating schools. And I'm not sure that's where we need to go. But, and there's some literature beginning to emerge out there about, you know, that issue. And so we know that that's an issue. It doesn't mean that MTSS is not a viable way of doing some things, but it's just that it's not the, you know, it's not the salvation, and it doesn't close the very many equity gaps. And that's kind of unfortunate, but no, I won't go any further. I'm sorry. I have.
Thank you for saying what you said.
I have blasted that way too much in too many places, but
No, it's good to hear other perspectives. So I much appreciated.
when you start reading some of the stuff from some of the real major contemporary scholars and public education, people that study and write about public education all the time, and almost to a person, they come to the same conclusion that, you know, programs like that particular programs like that are not really what you want to be doing if you're trying to close big time equity gaps. But I understand the need to get control in a building and, you know, have some order in a building. I just think if you there are two ways to get control of the building. One is to require people to be wherever you want to require them to be, and put them into programs where they don't have the opportunity to create problems or hassles. But, you know, I was always taught that the best way to get control of the building is to get students engaged in the learning process. And, you know, the way you get control of the building is you build engagement. Now, however you do that, there are a gazillion strategies for building engagement in a building, student engagement. But however you do that, you know, if students are engaged, then their learning is directed more toward what you want them to be directed toward. If they're not engaged, they're still learning. They're just not learning, you know, the stuff that you might be interested in having them learn. And so it is you know, it's a double-edged sword, but, you know, you have to put up with some stuff while you get student engagement. And then somewhere in the middle probably is a combination of activities that actually works, where you use, you know, something like strategies like MTSS in some level, not whole hog, to help you control the building. At the same time, you're doing staff development and things that you need to do to generate a higher level of student engagement. But yeah, I've been preaching that for 30 years and seeing it more and more. We are seeing it more and more. But I don't know what this pandemic is going to do to any of that, because I just don't frankly know how we're going to come out the other end, what school's going to look like once we come out the other end. If any of you have that magic crystal ball and can tell us that, I'll be glad to help you write the book that will make us all fabulously rich. But it's not a quick and dirty thing. It's we kind of have to slog it out, I guess, figure out what we're going to do. I'm sorry, I got distracted. My apologies. You know, when you get a certain age, you wander. You know, your mind wanders into places it shouldn't go. So, other questions or thoughts? I mean, I don't want to dwell. I don't want to hold you here you know, with some comments about stuff you were supposed to have read.
I don't have any questions, but I've really enjoyed these readings. Normally, the readings like bore you to death in these classes,
Mhm.
but I have really enjoyed the readings for this class, and several of my teammates have said the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, you don't need to listen to me. You just need to listen to the scholars that are out there, you know? And then if you have questions, then we can chew it all you want to and see what we, you know, see if we can help, you know, clarify it or spin it out in its proper form or something like that. But I've always felt that learning was a process of discovery on your own part. And that
I agree
hasn't
with
helped
that.
me some places, but it works most places. Yeah. Do
I
have
agree.
good resources though. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with the readings, what she was saying, because they're real life situations and they actually do make sense. Because as I read them, it makes me think, oh, this is what it means. This is why this is happening. This is why they're doing this. So I really do enjoy those readings as well because one, it's an easy read. Two,
Yeah, it's not hard.
so, I mean, it makes sense to me. So that's why I enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to really give a lot of credit to Dr. Howard because as these courses were being built, she was kind of decided she wanted to take charge of identifying, you know, the readings that they wanted to use in the course. And so most of those, not all of them, but most of those are recommendations from her. And she's been pretty good about that. And I had a couple of pieces in the Washington Post this past Sunday that I really wanted to put up, but I resisted. I will probably put those up as kind of extra readings when we get to the opportunity gap part, which will be you know, sometime beginning of April, because they kind of attack this notion of understanding the idiosyncrasies of different cultures and students from different cultures. And that, you know, as a teacher, you can't you can't just have one lens. You can't have, you know, I like my classroom to be quiet and orderly. You know, maybe that's not the lens. Maybe the classroom needs to be energetic or whatever. And so you have you know, one piece was this piece written by this teacher that taught for a long time, taught Spanish, I think, foreign language for a long time. And it took her leaving the classroom and doing something else to realize how bad a teacher, even though she had been teacher of the year and things like that, how bad a teacher she had been to some of her minority students because she didn't understand, you know, the idiosyncrasies of their culture and how, you know, their personal behavior would change, would vary so much from, you know, the majority white kids in the school and you know, those types of things. And I think those are important conversations to have. And so we'll, you know, I'll put up a couple of those too, because I think those are discussions that are beginning to take place right now as we sort through all these race and cultural diversity issues, and at the same time kind of rebuild schools and figure out how we're going to do schools. Well, somewhere we've got to integrate those ideas. Somewhere we've got to integrate, you know, those thoughts, because you know, both of them are impediments to learning. You know, whether it's cultural or racial or ethnic or, you know, whatever the differences are, they're all impediments to learning. And if we don't figure out how to embrace them, as opposed to, you know, yeah. But yeah, the schools that I worked with here for the last 15 years, we had a school division in where I live here in Harrisonburg that's 60 different dialects spoken in the school division. And there were 42 languages last year, languages and dialects spoken in the high school alone. And they're one of the nation's top 100 high schools. And they a long time ago, they decided, you know, we're going to have to embrace this because, you know, our community has become very, very, very diverse. And, you know, we have immigrants from all over the world that come in here because of the educational institutions and the agriculture, and, you know, it's kind of a booming area around here. So, yeah, and the schools, you can have good schools and very diverse clientele. And so it was you know, it'd be almost impossible to tell you all the steps that they took and all the things they did, but over a period of 15 or 20 years. But, you know, now there may be some occasional rifts within the community, but there are no rifts in the schools. You know, the kids and the teachers and all, if there's an issue, they hammer it out, they work it out. And I wish we could train, you know, all teachers to do that, but, you know, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to do. And it takes a level of commitment that maybe doesn't exist necessarily yet in North Carolina. I don't know. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be negative there. It's just, you know, I've seen it work, and I guess that's why, you know, I know that it can be done. All right, I'll shut up. Any other questions? Any other comments? Anything you want to talk about? I assume all your schools are sort of coming back together, and people are sort of beginning to go back into the classroom, and you know, the bottom hadn't fallen out quite yet. But, you know, generally about this time of year, things have gotten so bad that we need a spring break. But since it doesn't look like spring break's happening in too many places, outside of a couple of days at Easter, maybe, you just have to find ways to keep it going. Stay safe and keep it going. All right, folks. Well, I'm not going to bore you, hold you. So I will not see you the next 2 weeks unless you ask me to, or if you send me, you know, questions or whatever, I'll respond to anything that you want me to respond to. I just don't want to respond to pieces of work before, you know, the due date sort of thing, because I'm going to read it much more thoroughly then. And so I want to encourage people to, you know, use your creativity, and if you get to a point where you can't decide, you know, should I do A or B here, you know, pick one. Go one direction or the other, and don't get caught up in that trap of indecision. One thing you have to be as a leader is to be, when it's time to make a decision, you have to be decisive. You can't get caught up in indecision, and so you don't want to be there. All right.
May I ask one quick question?
Sure.
If we are wanting to send you our group project before the 5th to look at.
That's fine. I'll try to look at it, but
Okay.
I won't guarantee that I'll get to it beforehand, but I'll try.
Okay.
Yeah, there's only 4 of those, so I could probably slide one in there someplace along with a few other stuff. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Is that link up and live? Did I didn't notice? Yeah, I think it is. I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah. Okay. The submission link, I think, is live. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Hearing nothing, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion approved. So we will adjourn, and I will see you in, gosh, I guess it's going to be 3 weeks. Get these things done. You have 2 weeks now, unencumbered, to get, well, unencumbered by me at least, to get things done. So, as one of my favorite Star Trek lines, make it so.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Good night, people. Stay safe.